In this video, we are going to be doing an overview of the most recognizable mech in Battletech. The machine was an original concept from the 1980s, and was one of the most noticeable designs from before legal problems pushed many of the more famous mechs into the category of the unseen. This would be a boon for this mech, as it was pushed to the forefront and allowed to flourish, so much so that its head is often a part of the very logo of the franchise. One of the most feared mechs ever produced, this machine would stand the test of time from era to era. Though it has its detractors, or those who feel it's overrated, it's impossible to deny its presence in the setting or the game. Today, we are going to talk about General Alexander Kerensky's nightmare, the Atlas. An assault mech weighing in at 100 tons, the Atlas was built to solve a series of conflicts which had started to pester the Star League internally. Though the Sldf was originally designated to defend the Inner Sphere, it would often be used as a cudgel to keep the Inner Sphere in line with the Star League itself, being used as an ominous threat or consequence for stepping out of line. This, however, started to change in the twilight years of the Star League itself, where house militaries were starting to grow ever greater in size and becoming an ever greater threat against the central authority of the First Lord, de facto Terran superiority, and the Sldf. Massive budgets were put into place to keep up with the houses and to keep ahead militarily and technologically. The Atlas was born into this environment, and born with the explicit purpose of helping keep the Star League ahead of the duplicitous House Lords. The concept of the Atlas's overall purpose and layout were put in place by Alexander Kerensky himself. While the project was being put into the bidding phase, he would state it should be, quote, "a mech as powerful as possible, as impenetrable as possible, and as ugly and foreboding as conceivable, so that fear itself will be our ally." In 2755, his dream, no, his nightmare, was born into the world. This enormous machine, after only making a few appearances, gained a horrifying reputation as being an unstoppable dreadnought, shirking off autocannon and PPC fire as if they were arrows fired into a stone wall. Additionally, it had a horrifying visage. The Death's Head was built around its cockpit, letting all who faced it know that their doom approached. This classic design might oversee a few changes with time, but importantly, the skull face was never done away with. Mechwarriors, even veterans, when they see this monster coming into view, are said to often feel a cold sweat appear, knowing that their lives may be in serious danger just by this beast's very presence. The machine would do as Kerensky and the Star League desired for a decade, leading up to the Amaris Civil War. The appearance of this monster gave many of the house militaries and nobles pause, and any action it participated in would be successful in using its reputation to quell animosities and disputes. All seemed to be well until the Amaris Civil War, which would see the Star League itself finally decline and collapse. It would be this conflict itself that would further enhance the reputation of the Atlas, as it was the first time it was seriously deployed to any major conflict, and it performed horrifyingly well across the Sldf's campaign. In the final battles raging outside of Amaris's palace, even though he piloted an Orion, it would be the looming form of his second-in-command, General de Chavier, which would breach the outer walls and follow Kerensky to the usurper's throne. And that mech was indeed an Atlas. Fascinatingly, the Atlas would become a new symbol of the new era in another way as the Sldf and Star League vanished from the Inner Sphere following the conflict. Many pilots would take their machines and leave in the Exodus, but of Atlas pilots, 2/3 opted to stay in the Inner Sphere and fight. Some would claim noble purposes, wanting to use their machines to save lives in the chaos that was to come. Others were naked in their ambitions, wanting to use their mechs to claim social standing and power for themselves. There are many who made names for themselves during the succession war to come, and of those who survived, fortune, titles, and status awaited them. There are some minor noble families within the Inner Sphere who are of standing and importance, who likely can trace back their ancestors to these pilots, the ones who refused to depart with the Exodus. This means that this Battlemech helped reshape the face of politics just by its presence in the wars that raged after the death of the Star League that forgot it. Despite many designs being lost during the Succession Wars, several manufacturers maintained the ability to produce Atlases, and would continue to do so for centuries. Defiance Industries, Robson Standard Battleworks, Independence Weaponry, and Yori Mechworks were all the main producers. This granted the design as a production model to the Lyran Commonwealth, Federated Sons, and Draconis Combine during the Succession Wars, and enhanced the prowess of their militaries simply by having a mech of such quality and power at their disposal. Though the Capellan Confederation and Free Worlds League had no domestic production of these models, making them rarer, they would find their way into their inventories as well. Mercenaries, when given a chance, should they have the C-bills, would often jump at the chance to procure such monsters for themselves too, hoping to build their reputation, and sometimes they would do this without thinking of the maintenance and repair costs when jumping at the chance to get this war machine. One thing is true, regardless of if this Battlemech fights under the banners of the House Lords, or under the command of a mercenary unit, that where the Atlas goes, terror is its greatest weapon and companion wherever its mighty feet tread. The Atlas's configuration as it was known in the Star League and Succession Wars is the AS-7D Atlas. The AS-7D Atlas has several important things about it beyond its overall game design. It possesses a sophisticated communication system, namely the Army Comm System Class 5, and a large antenna on its head, giving it the ability to communicate with this system, within reason, from the surface of the planet reliably with ships in orbit, making it possible for it to function as a command mech. While it does not perform this task as well as, for example, a Cyclops, it can nonetheless function at this job admirably. In-game, under the advanced rule system, this gives the Atlas the command mech and improved communications design quirks. When it comes to the physical properties of the AS-7D's chassis, it begins with its powerful engine, the VLAR 300 Standard. Though this impressive 19-ton power plant can propel the iconic Dragon, a 60-ton heavy mech, at 86 km per hour, inside of the juggernaut that is the Atlas, it can provide the 100-ton Colossus with a maximum speed of 54 km per hour, or 5 movement points on the tabletop game. Though this is not the slowest mech possible for its weight, the Atlas is one of the slowest mechs of its era as a result. This is not necessarily a death sentence for the machine, due to its other properties, but it is a weakness and can be its own downfall. If stuck in rough terrain or isolated from allied forces, should they outpace it or be drawn away, it can leave the Atlas dangerously exposed, and it may be felled or overwhelmed despite its size and strength. This is not inadequate for its mass, it is expected while being from this weight bracket and tonnage. In terms of heat-sinking ability, the AS-7D Atlas has a total beyond respectable for its time. Namely, it has 20 standard heatsinks. This allows the machine mostly to be able to fire its primary weapons package at most ranges, without incurring dangerous heat levels beyond irresponsible use of the machine, or a lack of discipline when it comes to weapons fire. The reputation of the AS-7D Atlas as a horrifying weapon of war is not simply born of its terrifying appearance, but of course, from its beastly performance in the realm of destructive power. The weapon systems on the Atlas tend towards closer ranges, but it does have a punch beyond this. As an aside, the original TRO 3025 doesn't specify which manufacturer makes each weapon system on board for the Atlas, simply defining them as their class, with newer sourcebooks coming out later confirming their variations. It is important to note one might assume, perhaps, that an Atlas built by Yori Mechworks, which would likely not have readily available Defiance weaponry as it is built by the Lyran Commonwealth, may have to substitute the following weapons for localized production models, perhaps possessing some slightly different in-universe properties that would not impact the game. This is just an assumption on my part, but it is something I felt worth noting given the deliberate vague listing of the original TRO, which is normally quite descriptive, and given the different states these manufacturing centers that still produced the AS-7D reside in. As described by the Succession Wars TRO, the AS-7D Atlas comes armed with a myriad number of specific weapons. But these are the classes of what these weapons are. It has a Defiance Mech Hunter autocannon, which in-game is described as an AC-20 class autocannon, the heaviest and highest damage weapon of the Succession Wars, and the only weapon which can reliably blast the head clean off an enemy mech in a single round. In addition to this ferocious autocannon, the AS-7D backs up its primary death dealer with two Defiance B3M medium lasers mounted into each of its arms, as well as a Tharhes Mexi short-range missile system with 6 tubes. These are used as secondary weapons to scorch away armor or to punch rounds into openings made by the large autocannon. To defend its rear while it's in harsh engagements, there are 2 additional Defiance B3M medium lasers, with many customized variations of the Atlas switching these into the center torso instead to increase its frontal assault while not concerning itself with being flanked while being distracted. Finally, this monster possesses a Farfire Maxi Rack long-range missile system with 20 tubes. To give perspective, the Atlas, with a secondary weapon system, has the primary armament equivalent of a medium mech dedicated to long-range fire support, namely the Whitworth. This brutal configuration of weapons provides the AS-7D Atlas with an intense punching power. Near-peer adversaries like the King Crab can often be cited as hitting harder, but often it doesn't have the staying power. The reputation of this monster and its weapon systems are earned through the broad diversity of fire, as well as the reliability of that fire. Many mechs have fallen to the roar of the Atlas's autocannon, as flashing lights and missiles shred through their Battlemechs, as they have fruitlessly attempted to stand up to this mammoth in a one-on-one fight, especially given its weapons are not even its greatest advantage. Of all the features of the Atlas, one which is known, but never really realized by many mech commanders as they send their Mechwarriors to their deaths, is the incredible durability and protection the AS-7D possesses. It is the most armored mech of its era, with a full 19 tons of standard armor, or in other words, it has almost as much armor as the Locust weighs as a mech, conferring it 304 points of armor to be distributed across the chassis. To completely strip all of its armored protection off in a theoretical realm, which wouldn't happen, it would need to be shot by 30 PPC rounds, or 20 Gauss rifle shots, or 15 direct AC-20 hits. And this scenario doesn't, of course, take into account its plentiful internal structure, despite the drawbacks that might have in terms of critical hits. It is a mountain taken form into a mech. What makes the AS-7D Atlas so horrifying is not simply its death's head, or reputation. These are born of the grim realities of fighting this machine, particularly for pilots in slower medium mechs, heavy mechs, or even other assault mechs. When facing down the skull-covered behemoth, one will find their weapon systems are inadequate to the task to halt this brutish Battlemech, barring the luckiest of shots. Worse still, once entirely engaged, they will find themselves taking horrendous damage. having limbs torn free or torsos rend open, or perhaps being punched or kicked by a machine many times their mass. Seemingly invulnerable, it has created its reputation for the same reasons Kerensky originally envisioned. He has been proven right by the Atlas's design again and again, and throughout the ages. Time would begin to change the face of warfare, however, as well as the opponents for this titanic warrior. New technologies would begin to appear, and just in time for what was to come. The age of the AS-7D would begin to fade just as the clan invasion would take place. Genetically engineered Vat-born soldiers from a militaristic culture would invade the Inner Sphere and cut into the Lyran Commonwealth, Draconis Combine, and the fledgling Free Rosselhake Republic. Their invasion would be astonishingly fast, utilizing their dramatically superior technology and true-born warriors to see them run over hundreds of systems. The great houses would struggle to shift their resources to try to plug these gaping wounds. Technology, however, had recently been discovered within the Inner Sphere, and with the war having broken out, this led to a mass reindustrialization of much of the Inner Sphere, which began producing new mechs with new technology to war with their clan counterparts. One design that was at first hesitant to be changed was the Atlas, but it was changed all the same and pushed into the war with the clanners. Both older models like the AS-7D and newer models such as the AS-7K and AS-7S would face down this new threat from beyond the Inner Sphere. That threat knew the history of the Atlas well, as they were descendants of the exodus from the Inner Sphere, the fleeing members of the Star League Defense Force. Long ago they had moved on from the older mechs which they had departed with, now using newer, vastly superior clan mechs and omni-mechs. To them, facing off against spheroid, freeborn opponents was a simple task. But despite this arrogant attitude often playing out in their favor, there were designs that would be surprising, and would overwhelm these gene-enhanced warriors. Mechs such as the Banshee 5S, the Highlander 732, the Flashman HK, and others would force these conquerors to pay a bloody toll. The Atlas would too play its role once again as a terrifying fortress of metal and weaponry, crashing into its clan counterparts and punishing arrogant warriors with a mass of armor and firepower, often being a key linchpin in many successful battles against clan warriors, stopping their warpath in both Lyran and Draconis space. I will be so bold as to say that the Atlas is a major factor behind the LCAF and the DCMS holding back the tide of technologically superior invaders, and their inevitable defeat during the original clan invasion. I will also go so far as to say that there would even be more worlds in the Inner Sphere that fell under clan occupation had it not been for the Atlas and its peers during the battles that raged from August 3049 to the Battle of Tukid in May 3052. Two variants of the Atlas in this time couldn't be further from one another in their concepts. The AS-7S followed in its predecessor's footsteps, while the AS-7K took on a radical departure from the AS-7D's original design. The AS-7S Atlas is the simplest change. Instead of doing a massive redesign of the original unit, it would do a simple retrofit to benefit the original design with new technology. It would have a total of 15 double heat sinks, giving it 30 sinking capacity, and save 5 tons of weight. It would unfortunately double down on rear-firing weaponry by adding 2 SRM-2 Streak launchers to its rear arc. Otherwise, it possessed the same weaponry arrangement of the original AS-7D Atlas. Though modification of mechs in general is uncommon, much like its parent, the AS-7D Atlas, a common change is to shift its rear-firing weapons into the front arc. This is the only meaningful difference between the AS-7D Atlas, and the design was popular. Removing any heat issues at all made the AS-7S Atlas a powerful entity on the battlefield, but one which was a known quantity. The AS7K Atlas, however, is a massive departure from the original design, stripping the Atlas of all of its weaponry, barring the original LRM package, though this is manufactured by Shogunga. Instead, the AS7K would continue to have 20 standard heatsinks, which is its greatest shortcoming, as its heat management is a major issue. It would unfortunately also possess an XL engine, decreasing its legendary durability and survivability in combat, though its armored plating was left unchanged, meaning this issue may not be as prevalent as in other mechs. It also does possess an anti-missile system, attempting to keep the Atlas somewhat less threatened from dedicated missile bombardment, as well as a case for much of its ammunition and Gauss rifle, to enhance the chances of the pilot surviving and allowing the mech to be more salvageable. For weapons, the AS7K changes its design idea, which is that the Atlas is not a close-range brawler, but that it is a long-range direct fire support mech. The most obvious swap is changing out the Defiance autocannon in favor of a Dragon's Fire Gauss rifle, giving it an extremely long-range, deadly weapon, and one which is on par, barring its weight, with its clan counterpart. It of course retains its LRM 20 tubes, and goes on further to enhance its long-range fire with twin Victory nickel alloy extended-range large lasers. Finally, it possesses two rear-firing Victory Heartbeat medium pulse lasers. The primary issue with the AS7K outside of its XL engine is its atrocious heat management for its overall systems. Twin ER large lasers, a Gauss rifle, and an LRM-20 at long range is not something that can be easily ignored. But the truth is, it's really one ER large laser, a Gauss rifle, and an LRM-20, simply because it does not have the sinking capacity to even think about firing all of its long-range weapons in one turn, as it would generate a staggering 31 heat and place the Atlas in a terrible position in the following turn, with numerous negative heat side effects. While this is still a dangerous piece to see on the field, and one which many of its clan counterparts may struggle with, just simply due to the enormous amounts of armor protection, the AS7K is a new but flawed offspring of the series. It would be refined further, as would its cousin the AS7S series, throughout the eras of warfare that would follow. But during the initial clan invasion, these two designs were the Atlas assault mech on the front lines, fighting against the horrors of the clan invasion, and inspiring terror in their adversaries, with their lumbering form emerging, eventually to clan warriors' chagrin, to act as bastions, a seawall against the storm of the clan invasion itself. Sometimes the wall would fail, and the storm would wash over, but other times it held, keeping back the tide that threatened to drown the inner sphere. Many clan warriors died facing down the mech their progenitors piloted, feeling the same terror their ancestors instilled in others themselves, as they fell in desperate struggles to survive against the nightmare Kerensky himself envisioned. There are many more wars the Atlas would see the face of. The Federated Commonwealth Civil War and breakup had Atlases on both sides. The Chaos March campaign would see the defenders rely on this chassis more so than the attackers. The Blakest assault on the inner sphere would see the Atlas enter the fray against the fanatics. It would be there for the birth, life, and death of the Republic of the Sphere in the Dark Age, and the Atlas now stands tall, after all of these centuries, against the new Ill Clan. In this new era, the clans have become established in Inner Sphere space, mutating over time into a new threat. The houses themselves have begun bickering and fighting amongst themselves, such as the war between the Draconis Combine and Federated Sons, and otherwise as well. War and its impact on industry, however, never changes. The Draconis Combine and the beleaguered Lyran Commonwealth would both introduce their own evolutions of the Atlas for this new age of the mid-3100s. The Combine would, through Independence weaponry, introduce the AS-8K Atlas, an evolution of the K series, which ran from the AS-7K through to the AS-7K4. This design would implement new technologies, just as before, and would be a broad evolution of the AS-7K series. Powered by a 300XL engine once more, it followed much of the same design template except by several important regards. The AS-8 utilizes double heat sinks, having a total of 28 sinking ability. It also has a new kind of armored protection, known as ballistic reinforced armor. This armor is not as protective overall, but reduces all incoming autocannon and missile weapon damage by half, making the mech wearing it incredibly durable to these systems. The AS-8-K would have a full 26 tons of this armor, making it just as armored point for point as its cousins, and making it intensely resilient to ballistics damage. To add more to its survivability, it has a pair of Case 2s protecting it, making sure the mech can still function even after an internal explosion, or giving it time to back out of the fight where it can still be repaired. For remaining weapons, it follows much of the same path. Its twin ER large lasers and Gauss rifle are still present, but now it has some ability to defend itself in close engagements. This would be by replacing the LRM launcher with an MML-5, allowing it to fire SRMs or LRMs with this system. In addition, it has a full Streak SRM-6 launcher, harkening back to the original AS-7D, but with new technology. Finally, the AS-8-K has two ER medium lasers, but facing towards the rear. The main takeaway from the AS-8 isn't that its weapons are particularly advanced, though they are a better mix than before, but its increased durability. Its incredible volume of armor, combined with its properties to ignore half of all ballistics damage, makes it a mech that may feel impossible to remove from the board by many designs. This embodies more than anything the reputation that the Atlas is simply relentless, and the AS-8 is most certainly that. The final design to discuss is the descendant of the AS-7S series, the AS-8S Atlas. It is in many ways more technologically sophisticated. It uses client technology in many aspects of the internal construction of the unit and its weaponry, thanks to the Lyran Commonwealth's advances in research and development. This titanic monster is a horrifying sight to behold, especially as it is built around a weapon system at its core. Built on Hesperus II, the industrial beating heart of the Commonwealth, it must be one of the great trophies that Defiance has. Powered by a clan standard VLAR 300XL engine, its durability isn't nearly as fragile as a standard Innersphere XL engine would contribute, giving the unit extra weight savings, but at a much lower risk. In addition to this, it has a total of 32 double heat sinks, giving an immense ability to offload fire onto targets at various ranges. Keeping its original 19 tons of armor, the AS-8S would enhance this in two ways. Firstly, by placing explosive systems and munitions on board in Case 2s, allowing the unit to survive ammunition and Gauss rifle explosions, and second, it would add a Guardian ECM, helping the Atlas survive further with electronic countermeasures. The truth is, the AS-8S is almost a bit of an inversion, or rather, focuses on the opposite side of the scales that the AS-8K does. This variant is, for the most part, built around its enormous and absurdly dangerous Defiance Annihilator improved heavy Gauss rifle, giving it one of the most powerful weapons possible in a direct fire role. This enormous weapon does more damage than the original AS-7D's AC-20, but at over double the original range, making it extremely threatening to anything in its way, and has an excessive ammunition capacity of 24 rounds of fire. In addition to this, it still maintains its SRMs, but they have become an SRM-6 Streak, and it still has its rear-firing medium lasers, but now they are of clan quality, the CM9 Extended Range Medium Laser. Much like the AS-8-K seems to borrow from the AS-7D from before, the AS-8S seems to borrow from the K series as well, with it taking on twin clan-level Defiance C9L Extended Range Large Lasers, giving it even more killing ability at long range. Finally, it has a basic LRM-5 system on board as its final piece. Able to fight at long or short ranges, the AS-8-S is another powerful Dark Age and Ill Clan combatant, and is a worthy successor to the legacy it follows. Danger must flash for any Mechwarrior as they have to face down such a Gorgon, with its heavy Gauss rifle tearing holes in their chassis before being burned by lasers and battered by missile fire, only to see their own returning shots being absorbed into the Atlas without a flinch. The Atlas is the ultimate inner sphere assault mech. Though it is not without weaknesses, it is in every battlefield, in every campaign, and in every war a force of nature, and a dealer of destruction and death. Fortresses have had their walls crumble before its wrath. Mechwarriors from across the wars since its arrival have seen their final moments staring down the face of the Death's Head, even the vaunted Trueborn clan warriors. Though there are more dangerous machines from the clans due to lighter weapon systems, the Atlas still holds a place of fear in soldiers' and warriors' hearts, and it is still the premier of all assault mechs in the minds of commanders and players alike. It has fought for freedom. It has fought for conquest and tyranny. It has been deployed to lifeless, frozen worlds, tropical paradises, and everything in between, all while displaying its horrifying death mask to those in opposition to it, or even those who are allied with it. Battlemechs have often been described as lords of the battlefield, standing tall as they are piloted by the lords and ladies of the inner sphere. Prior, when I described assault mechs as a whole, I described them as being monsters of the battlefield, there to kill noble warriors before returning to their lairs. But the Atlas is something more. It holds a place above the others, hence why it became the very face of Battletech itself, and later even Mechwarrior. The Atlas transcends these other steel monsters, forcing them to step aside as it makes its way through them. Only a few inner sphere designs dare even stand in this monster's way, and many would regret it. The Atlas is no simple monster. It stands out from that. It stands above it. It is the king of the monsters. Thank you everyone for joining me here today. It was important to me that I covered the Atlas in a different way, if only because it has an incredible place within the series. It may have its detractors, but in my view, it is the king, and thus it needs its respect and its due. If you enjoyed this content, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. I also have a YouTube members program and would greatly appreciate your support if you enjoyed this content. With that, I will catch all of you in the comments section below.